Okay, good. Okay, let's start. We've spoken before about the concept of the cycle of time. The cycle of time being the 7 days of the week. And here we have, I hope everyone can see. Can you see the charts? Can you see the chart on the screen? Yeah, good. Okay, so here this is the chart of the Sfirot. There's 10 Sfirot, but we're only showing the lower 7. And as we discussed before, the 7 days of the week correspond to the 7 Sfirot from Chesed, Sunday, Gvura, Monday, Tiferet, Tuesday, and so on and so forth, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbat being Malchut. Now, nature, it seems to be an almost natural thing. All cultures seem to have accepted the idea of a 7-day week. It's universal. Interestingly enough, I believe it was Stalin in Russia that tried to make a 10-day week. He wanted to get a cram in an extra couple of days of work before they would get a break, but somehow or another it didn't work out. In any event, whether there are cultures or who may have some other way of counting the days of the week, this is certainly the biblical, and when I say biblical, I mean literally in the Bible, in Genesis, it speaks about God created in the 6 days and the 7th day rested. What does that mean, etc., etc.? We're not going to get into over here. This is not the discussion here. There was a previous class on this concept, but what I do want to get into is the concept of the eighth day. The 8th day, which transcends the 7 days, the 7-day cycle. The 7-day cycle is the cycle of nature. It's a cycle of the renewal of nature. 6 days of building, 1 day of rest. Or if we could put it this way, the way it's put in Kabbalistic terminology is the 6 days of the week represent the 6 sides of space. The 6 sides of space being the 4 directions, north, south, west, east, and up and down, above and below. That's altogether 6 sides. Malchut represents the idea of time. It's also the center of the box of directions. If the directions move in every direction from the core, from the center, that's where Malchut is. And it's very important to note that space and time are a function of each other in Kabbalah as well. Malchut is the center from which space radiates. And it's also the concept of time because time is measured by space. And space is sometimes measured by time. In any event, again, these are subjects that we have spoken about before. But just suffice it to say that the main concept over here is that there's a cycle of time, a natural cycle of time. This is time within nature, the 7 days. The 8th day is that which transcends the time and is called in Kabbalistic and halachic terminology, the terminology of halakha, Jewish law, it is called, I'll write it in the box, Shomer HaHekef. Shomer HaHekef. That which guards the cycle of time. It transcends the cycle of time. It's above the cycle of time, but keeps the cycle of time within its natural boundaries. It's called Shomer HaHekef, the guard of the cycle, so to speak. Now, why is this important? The importance here is related to a story which we read this Shabbat. This past Shabbat, we just read a section which is called Shmini. Shmini meaning the 8th. It's an account of what happened on the 8th day after the building of the tabernacle. Sorry, the 8th day after the dedication, the 8th day of the dedication of the tabernacle. The tabernacle had been built, and there were 7 days of the inauguration, 7 days of inauguration. And each day they set up the tabernacle and took it down again, and set it up and took it down again, constructed and deconstructed it 7 times. And on the 8th day, they constructed it again. And it was on that day that the divine presence rested on the tabernacle. The 8th day. So 8 is therefore a very important concept. Not only do the 7 days of the inauguration of the tabernacle parallel the 7 days of creation, but the 8th day also parallels the event which transcended creation, which was the giving of the Torah. The giving of the Torah is a day which transcends creation, was the giving of the world its ultimate purpose and direction, and the direction in which it should go. Now, there was an event that happened on that day, a very unfortunate event, even though it was an extremely blessed day, an extremely happy day. There was an unfortunate event. Aaron, Moses' brother, Aaron, who was the high priest, Aaron, had 2 sons. Actually, he had 4 sons, but 2 of them are spoken about here. Their names were Nadav and Avihu. So, these 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, decided that they were going to bring a sacrifice of incense. They were going to bring an incense offering into the Mishkan, into the temple, into the tabernacle. But this offering, this incense offering, had not been commanded. They go into the tabernacle, they bring the incense offering, and all of a sudden, fire comes out from heaven, so to speak. So what so to speak means not heaven, so to speak, but fire, so to speak. It wasn't real fire. According to the sages, it was like 2 major electrical discharges, you might call them. In any event, supernal heavenly fire comes out and consumes them, and they die, and then they're taken out and they're buried. Moses turns to Aaron and he says to him, this is not in the text, it's according to the Midrash, the explanation, the rabbinical explanation of the text. Moses says to Aaron, I knew that on the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, I knew that there would probably be an incident of this sort. Only I thought that it would be you or me. I didn't think it would be your sons. But they're obviously holier than us, and that's why they were taken away. Bikrovai ekadesh, I will be sanctified, says God in that section. I'll be sanctified by those who are close to me. I'll be sanctified by those who are close to me. So anyway, the 2 sons of Aaron died. And after Moses comforts him and says that, these boys must have been particularly holy. I thought it would be you or me, but I see it's them because they're holier and closer to God than us. So the text then says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was silent. Aaron was silent. He didn't say anything. Now, as I said before, there's midrashic literature, rabbinical literature that explains the texts. Now, there's one midrash. There's many, many different books of rabbinical explanation. Some of them, most of them actually, from the very early, from very, very early times. We're talking about even 1st and 2nd centuries, up till about the 8th century or so, maybe around there. Anyway, there's one particular midrash which is called Midrash Peliah. Midrash Peliah. Now, what the word Peliah means? Huge surprise. Peliah means wonderment, the Midrash of wonderment. And it's partially called this because the observations of the Midrash are sort of, I don't know exactly what the word is for them, but they're astonishing. That's the right word. That's called the Midrash of astonishment. The statements that the Midrash makes are sometimes astonishing. We don't understand what the intention of the Midrash is, like what's going on. You really have to think deeply into what's going on. So this Midrash, the Midrash Peliah, on the verse that Aaron was silent, says the following. Well, what should he have said? If he was silent means that it's strange that he was silent. He should have said something. What should he have said? And the Midrash answers, he should have said, on the 8th day, he should be circumcised. On the 8th day, he should be circumcised. This is talking about a child which is born, a newborn boy. As you probably all know, the Torah requires Jewish males to be circumcised, and the circumcision takes place, if the child is healthy, the circumcision takes place on the 8th day. If the child is not healthy, then the circumcision can take place as soon as the child recovers. Usually, if the child is not healthy on the 8th day, they wait another week, usually. And if still not, they wait for longer than that. It could be even, several weeks or even months before the child is circumcised when circumstances demand such a thing. But usually the Brit Milah, the circumcision, takes place on the 8th day. Okay, so the Midrash says Aaron should have said on the 8th day he shall be circumcised. Now, what on earth does that have to do? That's what Aaron should have said according to the Midrash. On the 8th day he should be circumcised. What on earth is going on? What kind of an answer is that to the question, what should Aaron have said when his 2 sons died? Very strange answer. Midrash Peliah. It's astonishment Midrash. In order to be able to understand that, I have to tell you basically a story about the sage Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was a very, very great sage, one of the greatest of sages of all times during the Midrashic period, which is 1st, 2nd century. And at that time, this was the time after the destruction of the temple. The temple had already been destroyed. The temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed. And the governor that the Romans set up over Judea was a very wicked person, a real nasty person, a wicked person, whose name was Turnus Rufus. I believe that he's called Tineius Rufus in Roman literature, but he was called Turnus Rufus in the Talmud. Now, this Turnus Rufus, although he was a wicked person, but he was impressed by wisdom, and he liked very much to argue with the sages, and particularly with Rabbi Akiva, who he argued with all the time. He would present the Roman point of view, and he would argue that it's a better point of view, and he would get Rabbi Akiva, or one of the other sages, usually Rabbi Akiva, to respond. So, Turnus Rufus went once to Rabbi Akiva, or he called Rabbi Akiva in, and he said to him, which is better? Things made by the Almighty, or things made by flesh and blood, by man? So Rabbi Akiva replied, things made by flesh and blood are better. Strange answer, huh? Things made by flesh and blood are better. So Turnus Rufus said to him, oh boy, sorry. Let me just make sure that I have to turn that off. 1 second. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I should have turned my phone off before. Okay, so Turnus Rufus was expressed his shock, and he said to him, "How could it be? How could it be that things made by flesh and blood are better? Heaven and earth. What about heaven and earth? Can a human being make heaven and earth?" So Rabbi Akiva responds to him, "Don't talk to me about things that man has no hand in and has no control of. Talk to me about things that man does have a hand in, man does have control of." So Turnus Rufus's question was really, and then he asks it, he said, "So why do you circumcise yourselves if certain things should be left alone because man doesn't have a hand in them? The way you were born, men were born with a foreskin. Why circumcise?" So Rabbi Akiva replies, "I knew that was your question, and that's why I told you that things made by man are better than things made by the Almighty." And then Rabbi Akiva turned to Turnus Rufus and he said, "What's better, wheat or a loaf of bread?" You can't eat wheat as is. You have to grind the wheat, you have to bake it into bread, and so on and so forth. And obviously, bread is better. So Turnus Rufus wasn't going to be so easily discouraged. And he said, if God wanted circumcision, why did he make the baby come out uncircumcised from the mother's womb? So Rabbi Akiva responded, because he wants to give man the possibility of rectifying the world by fulfilling the commandments. By fulfilling the commandments. So here we have it. Here's our question that we actually started off with, really. The question, the title of today's class has to do with accepting the world as we find it or changing it. What's better? To accept the world, just leave the world as it is, or to change it in whatever way. Let me first answer the question about why Aaron kept silent. And what should he have said? The Midrash says, what should he have said? He should have said that on the 8th day, a male child should be circumcised. A male baby should be circumcised. What the Midrash was saying is, Aaron should have said, since God created the world in such a way, and it says this actually in Genesis, and we said at the end of the sanctification of the Sabbath, when we make Kiddush on wine, Kiddush is the sanctification of the Sabbath over a cup of wine. So it says at the end of that sanctification, quoting from the verses, Asher bara Elokim la'asot, that God created to do or to perfect. God created this with the world in a certain way, but expected man to perfect it. He expected man to perfect it. The same thing is true, therefore, of Brit Milah. God created man in a certain way, but expects him, and commands, in fact, him to perfect it. Now, let's just take it outside the realm right now, the realm of the realm of commandments. In a general sense, there are approaches to the world. Certain aspects of Buddhism, I believe, are like this, where they say, just leave the world alone. The way the world is, just leave it. It's not your business to change it, and just leave things alone. We don't see it like that. The Torah does not see it like that. The Torah sees that there is a possibility of correction and perfection. So we could ask the question, when God created the world, it says that God saw that it was very good. He saw that it was good. Each day of creation saw that it was good, and saw it was very good. And he was satisfied with the creation that he made. If God created the world in a certain way, why is it that we have to get involved, so to speak? Why is it that we have to add something to it? And the reason is the way Jewish thought sees it and Kabbalah sees it, is that we are co-creators. We are co-creators. The world was created in a certain fashion, and it's good, but as the expression goes, the expression in Hebrew, or in Yiddish actually, good is good, better isn't better. If good is good, yes, the world was created good. There's a certain goodness, there's a certain wholeness, a certain perfection in the way the world was created, but it can be improved. This is the whole concept that Kabbalah speaks about, the whole concept of tikkun. Why the world needs tikkun. The world needs tikkun not because it's a broken world. The word tikkun usually means to repair. Yes, there are certain aspects of creation which need repair. They're sort of broken to a certain extent, but broken only in a sense. When we say broken, don't think of the brokenness as like a broken vessel when you drop a cup and it smashes into little pieces. Yes, true, you could glue the pieces together possibly, but it's just not going to be the same again. It'll never be the same cup as it was originally. We don't mean broken in that sense. Yes, it's true that the Torah talks about the shattered vessels of the world of Tohu. Right in the beginning of Genesis, there's a verse that says, the all of creation was waste and void, tohu vavoyu, and darkness upon the deep. So Kabbalah talks about that word tohu as being a state of being prior to the creation of tikkun, the rectification. So the state of being of tohu, of chaos and being devoid of light. It was a dark world. And to a certain extent, we can see that the return of the powers of Tohu in our modern world as well. But when we say that the world, the vessels of the world of Tohu smashed, we were nevertheless given the way of rectifying them, but rectifying them in such a way that they were better than before, not just shards sort of stuck together with some crazy glue or something like that to keep them together, but really reconstituting the vessels in a way that is much more powerful than they were before. So therefore, when we talk about the whole concept of tragedy, of negative things happening in the world, of unfortunate events, so that the world seems to be a broken world for a moment, the world is never broken in a permanent sense. The Talmud explains that the breaking is for the sake of repairing. The brokenness, the world of Tohu, it's actually explained in Kabbalah at length, that the world of Tohu was broken in order to repair it, but repair it in such a way that it is now more wholesome than it was before. When God creates something, He creates it to be mended, to be perfected. He creates it, the world was created, even though it was perfect as it was good, but better is still better. And that's the way things remain. Good the world was, but it can be better. And the betterness of the world, the improvement of the world, that's up to us. That we can do. That's the tikkun, which is essentially required by all of us. Each of us having a small part in this idea. So therefore, in fact, when the two sons of Aaron were when they brought the incense offering that wasn't commanded, what was their intention? Their intention was to make good even better. by doing what human beings could do. That was their intention. Their intention was not to gain power for themselves or to do all kinds of opinions as to what it was that they were up to. This opinion says that they had the right intention, but it was the wrong time, it was the wrong circumstance. Generally, the intention is we've got to add to the way we find things. We've got to improve the way we find things. That particular event, because it was Shomer HaEkev, was the 8th day. The 8th day transcends the natural cycle. We work within the natural cycle. When the transcendence of the natural cycle occurs, then it's time for silence. It's time for not doing. Most of the rest of the time, the rest of the days of work, the rest of the days are days of creation. Those are days when we have to create, when we have to make, when we have to repair, when we have to improve. And even the Sabbath, when we don't do any official work, is nevertheless part of that, because rest is part of the cycle of work. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, part of the same cycle. But when we come to the 8th day, the transcendent day, then we come to a level of, as Kimberly just pointed out over here, silence and awe. So that was when Aaron was silent. He could have said, but what about the 8th day when we have to circumcise? When there's certain occasions when we do have to get involved, even when it's a situation of the 8th day. But he didn't say it because he understood that there's some circumstances where the hand of man is not required. When there's a revelation of godliness from above, then we have to sit in silence. But the rest of the time we have to do our work. Now, last night, I was on a crisis hotline, last night late. I volunteer for crisis hotline, and there was somebody who's, unfortunately, somebody was on this line whose mother was basically in a coma, and the doctors had given very little time for her to yet live. And this young lady, young girl really, was very, very distraught, as you can imagine. And what she was distraught about was particularly that her relationship with her mother had not been great. She kind of kept on pushing her mother off. Her mother wanted to have a closer relationship, but, as teenagers and so on and so forth, children sometimes tend to be a bit standoffish. Could be. Who knows what the background was? I didn't really get into it. But a phrase came to mind. It's a quote from somewhere. I don't even know who the person who originally said it, but the quote was, "Don't send me flowers after I die. Send them while I'm still alive." So, folks, one of the things that we can do if we face tremendous difficulties and so on and so forth is to learn to appreciate, before we face those difficulties, preferably, is to learn to appreciate those who are around us in our lives, who are, yes, we have our little battles with them and we have our little disagreements and so on and so forth, and perhaps we standoffish or they're standoffish or whatever. Relationships aren't always the best, but there are little things that we can do, send flowers while they're alive, not after they pass on. And I think that we could say that Aaron was certainly a person who, being that his sons were so holy, it must have been that his relationship with them was extraordinary. And he certainly gave them flowers while they were alive. And just something to keep in mind. So Andrea asked here a question. Following the boy's death, Aaron refused to eat from the sacrifice he should have eaten from, was scolded for it by Moses. Scolded is not really the correct phrase, I would say, Andrea. He was questioned. Moses was upset that he didn't offer it. He didn't offer that sacrifice. He just let it be burned. And Moses questioned him as to why he let it be burned. If you ate the other sacrifices, why not this one? And there are many, many answers, but the most interesting answer that I've come across for this particular one, for this particular situation, again, let me just give the background over here. On the day that the tabernacle was erected, finally, on the 8th day, Aaron was supposed to bring 3 sacrifices. 2 of them were only brought at that particular time, and the third one was the offering for the new month. There was an offering, a sacrifice that was brought for the new month. It was the new month sacrifice that was not that was burned, that he allowed to be burned, and they didn't partake of those sacrifices, of those offerings. As Andrea said, Moses was inquiring why he didn't eat that sacrifice. Now, the truth is, the best explanation I ever heard why he didn't eat the sacrifice. There's many explanations, many explanations, but the best one I ever heard was that sacrifice was, again, as I said, the sacrifice for the new moon. Now, the Midrash explains why is it that we actually bring the sacrifice for the new moon. Yes, it is to inaugurate the coming month, that the coming month should be dedicated to God, just like the sacrifice was dedicated to God, and we should partake of it because that dedication should come down into the real world. But this sacrifice, says the Midrash explains, this sacrifice is brought because God reduced the moon. Now, this is a whole long discussion. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but basically what happened was, right at the beginning of the creation, there were 2 sources of light, the sun and the moon, and they were equally powerful. Now, what do they represent? The Kabbalah explains the sun represents, if we go to the our diagram of the Sfirot, 1 second, let me just get it up here. 1 second, I'm sorry. Let me just get it up again. If we go to our diagram of the Sfirot, here we go. The moon represents Malchut. The moon represents Malchut, and the sun represents these 6 Sfirot over here. Now, the way the Sfirot work is that these Sfirot work in an active sense. They're active. They shine forth. Whereas Malchut is receptive. Not passive, but receptive. The sun gives out light, the moon receives the light of the sun. That's the way it is now. Initially it was that the receptive quality also shone forth. It also shone forth. But the way the Midrash puts it, the moon complained that two kings cannot wear the same crown, and therefore God said, okay, so go and reduce yourself. Now you will receive light from the sun. You won't have your own light. Now, obviously, that's only it's not meant to be taken as a literal thing. It's meant to be taken and meant to be understood in the way Midrash is understood. It's you try and extract the point from it. So now, why do we bring the sacrifice on Rosh Chodesh, on the first of the month, on the new moon? Why do we bring that sacrifice? Because God said, "Bring for me a sacrifice, because I reduced the light of the moon. Bring for me, on my behalf, offer the sacrifice on my behalf, because I reduced the light of the moon." That was the sacrifice that Aaron didn't eat. Why did he let that fire be, it was a goat actually, why did he let it be burned up completely without partaking of it? Because he said as follows: if I bring this offering, I'm bringing it, so to speak, as an atonement for God himself, which may seem, therefore, like I'm expecting God to atone for taking my sons. I expect God to be, so to speak, apologize. And therefore, if I'm bringing a sacrifice on his behalf, it looks like I'm saying that he was in the wrong, and therefore I'm bringing this. Therefore, I'm not bringing this particular offering. I'm not bringing the offering. I'm going to just let it burn up, because I don't want it to be understood in any possible way that I'm thinking that God was in the wrong. He wronged me in any way, and therefore he couldn't bring that sacrifice. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Do we always have to go through a descent to grow spiritually? Generally correct. Yeah, there's always Yeridus and Aliyahs. There's always descents and ascents, but the purpose of the descent is the ascent. The purpose of the descent is not the descent itself. That was the creation to play God's hand. Yes, Monday is influenced by the moon. Tuesday by the Mars. The astrologically correlate to the Sfirot. Yeah, there are those that correlate them to the Sfirot. There is a correlation which is mentioned in commentaries of the Sefer Yetzirah, their book of formation, but they tend to be taken in a rather facile sense. In other words, there's no causative correlation really, but the Sfirot do correlate to the seven planets and so on and so forth. Yeah, Mazalot, correct. That would be the Mazalot. Okay, good, Annie. That is the concept. Could this reduction have anything to do with what scientists and researchers have concluded, an actual event that took place in the solar system? Yeah, it was an actual event. I mean, the whole shattering of the world at all was an event. And in fact, scientists are coming to understand things which have been understood in Kabbalah for many, many generations, since the time of the Arizal, since the 1500s. Scientists are only now coming to understand, for instance, that there are 10 dimensions. So we say that the 10 dimensions correspond to the Sfirot. And in fact, it is a basic teaching, the Kabbalah, that scientific discovery follows many, many years later the Kabbalistic discoveries. I mean, that's let me just put it to you in the original language. It says that the sparks of the thoughts of the Arizal and later on the Baal Shem Tov are the impetus for scientific discovery and truths about our world that would only be discovered in later generations. So, this the whole concept of the 10 dimensions that are folded into one another, and then there's at the very core of each dimension is a sort of string theory, is a string of energy, really a string of light. Really, that's what it is. And we have basically this is a complete understanding of Kabbalah itself. Talks about the Ese Igulim, and Yosher, which make up these 10 dimensions. I don't want to get into it now. It's not beyond the scope of today's class, but basically, yes, if you're asking the question, does it have anything to do with science and researchers have conducted in actual events? Yes. They concluded there are such an actual events. Yes, there's such actual events that happen. We argue that the time scale in which it happened is far shorter than scientists imagine. You see, they think of time as basically a linear scale of which we measure it in years generally, right? But just as the original dimensions of space were packed into one point, which is clearly spoken about in Kabbalah, and so the way scientists say, with a big bang, then all the dimensions developed afterwards. So too, the way we see it, so too with time. time was packed much more densely than it is now. So if we're measuring in human time, it would have seemed that billions of years have passed. But in divine time, since it was all packed together so carefully, so closely, it was only the days of creation, the 6 days of creation. Divine days, but days nevertheless. The Zohar explains that these are not really days, but qualities. It says in 6, I'm sorry, it doesn't say in 6 days God created the world. It says God created the world 6 days. These are the 6 sfirot of space. And then the 1 sphira of time. In any event, that is the idea. Okay.